It's been 3 whole weeks since I last uploaded an episode of Aerithyos, and you might be wondering where I've been. And the answer to that question is that I have been bullying kids in Minecraft. I mean, just watch me rob this child of his soul as I pricked the hell out of him. There's one guy I beat so bad that he called me an ackler.
Oh, hell no, man. What the fuck?
But aside from ruining lives and doing absolutely none of the stuff that I said I was going to do in the previous episode, I have been farming trees. Now you might be asking yourself, why do I need so many logs? I mean, I got like this many chests of logs. Why would I need that many? Well, the answer is that I am going to be using this entire block set for the rest of my build. Pretty much the entirety of all exterior builds, except for maybe some minor ones. And of this entire block set, only these ones are actually farmable. Those being the basalt generator that we made in episode 9, stone, which we haven't yet made, but we have a lot of from all the mining that we did in previous episodes, and of course, crimson logs. So in the previous episode, I was like, guys, I'm going to make a witch farm, and I'm going to make a sheep farm, and that was the plan walking into this episode. But obviously, I only ended up doing one of those things, and you might be asking yourself, why wouldn't you just make the sheep farm? It's just a sheep farm. Like, why would you lie to us over a sheep farm? And to be honest with you, who wants to transport 100 sheep into their basement, bro? Like, who would ever want to do that? And plus, witches are like super annoying. They're always splashing poison potions all over the place. And so I have to enact my revenge on the countless times that they've just brought me down to half a heart for no reason at all. And so I was inclined to make a witch farm. On a side note, I did need the redstone, but we're going to ignore that because witches are annoying and that's all that matters in life. So after deciding on a witch farm, I was able to locate a witch hut on a creative testing world, and I built the entire thing to make sure that it works. After that, I gathered enough materials to rebuild the entire Burj Khalifa and its 2,900 toilets. And that's when I finally got to building the first farm of this episode. Alright, here is the witch hut, where I will be building the whole thing. In fact, you can hear the witch still in there because I haven't killed him yet. So let's just get started on this. So you might be a little confused as to what just happened. I mean, I essentially just made a friggin' box. So I'm going to try and explain to you what's going on behind the scenes of this witch farm in a brief 1 to 2 minutes. So first of all, we have these floors with these alternating patterns of soul sand and stone bricks. Now, soul sand as a block happens to be slightly shorter than any normal block like smooth stone. As you can see, when I walk over top it, I move down slightly, and if I check my y coordinate, the same occurs. Because of this height difference, if we place these trapdoors like this, then when the floor shifts, mobs will phase through and fall into a killing chamber. This farm is built within the bounding box, or essentially spawning area of the witch hut. And so witches will spawn within these floors, and then they will phase through into the killing chamber. These witches will then travel up this bubble column to a platform 120 blocks in the sky, which is going to take advantage of the player's spawning radius in order to increase witch spawn rates. Now that the witches are up here, we can take advantage of this armor stand and its mechanics to hit all of the witches at once. Now, one thing I would like to note about the shifting floor design is that it completely solves the issue that I spent 4 hours fixing in the previous episode. So if you'll recall, I was talking about this shifting floor design that I was using, and the fact that villagers would spontaneously walk into this tiny little gap. And then I realized that all I need to do is replace these sticky pistons with normal pistons, and suddenly it will work, because now there won't be a gap. So if I just place some farmland here, and then put down a couple of crops, there is no longer a gap. See? It is no longer possible to die. So the issue that I spent 4 hours fixing in the previous episode, that I never even finished fixing, was solved by watching a witch farm in 20 hours of gameplay later. Don't you just love when the issue that you spent hours fixing gets solved by some random tutorial 20 hours of gameplay later? Me too. After taking a moment to regret my life choices, I started trading my crops with the villagers for emeralds and grinding wither skeletons in the nether fortress for a new beacon. By setting it to regeneration, I could nullify the effects of starvation, and soon I had a stable supply of redstone. After some searching, I settled on a design for the tree farm, which apparently uses
a plethora of technical tricks to squeeze the highest rates from an easy-to-build layout. The first of these isn't really a trick and is more just straight-up science.
According to the description, it also uses PhD level math for the piston layout, and a TNT duper that I will never understand how it works. After some more material gathering, I was able to start the first of 3 components. Now, after watching that time lapse and my test drive, you might be confused as to why this was only the first of 3 components. Well, to put it simply, this farm produces 100,000 logs every hour, and because of this, it soaks up a whopping 14,000 saplings and 35,000 bone meal every hour. This means I need to attach a bone meal farm and a sapling farm to this machine, but that comes with a catch. Not only does the bone meal farm need to supply the entire tree farm, but it also needs to supply the sapling farm as well. So here I am on the world download, and I'll try to explain this to you as best as I can, even though I don't quite understand it. So essentially, this fungus farm needs a lot of bone meal to sustain the player with enough saplings. And the way it does this is that waste, like these little plants here, are put into these composters, and the bone meal is funneled back into the system through this pipeline network. This, however, is not enough to supply the farm, and so a portion of the bone meal rates are redistributed through this pipeline network, which is, in my opinion, larger than it needs to be. Now, for me, there are two things that are different from the world download. First of all, I don't need blocks like warped netherwort. And so I can actually recycle this warped netherwort into the fungi system. Second is that I don't want my base to look ugly, and so I like to encase my mega builds, like this one, in a sort of structure, in a building, something like that, so that it's not plain out in the open. And so that means I want this thing to be relatively compact, and so a big pipeline system such as the one here is not going to cut it. So on my hardcore world, I do a couple things differently from the world download. First of all, I try to sort out all the items like crimson stems and shroom lights, the stuff I need, out of the water stream. The rest of the items will then be put into these composters, and the bone meal will put into these dropper chains. Now, the reason we use a dropper chain is because hoppers are simply not fast enough for providing bone meal to a farm like this that needs to be constantly functioning. The farm itself will sort out the saplings through this hopper chain, which then uses a dropper chain in order to bring everything up to this central dropper. And all the non-fungus waste is also put into the same line as the tree farm waste and is once again funneled into these composters for refueling the fungus farm. Now, obviously, I'm not exactly a redstoner, and I don't have any idea how pretty much all of this works. I just know how to move items from one place to another. And because of this, I'd actually estimate that my farm only runs at around 90% capacity, so it's probably 85 to 90,000 crimson stems every hour, but that is still more than enough. Aside from spending an hour trying to find good time-lapse music, from that short test run of just about 3 minutes, I was able to get this many resources. Oh no, that's just nether war. Oh no. Oh my god, there's so much logs, bro. Hold up. Oh my god. Bro. Look at this. Look at this. Look how many logs we have. That's insane. All of that in like 2 minutes. Bro, what? That's actually crazy. So after figuring out what kind of monster I had just created, I began to gather the materials for the bone meal farm, which is actually a modular design. I was worried I would mess up the stacking of the layers, so I downloaded the Lightmatica mod in order to get a full material list and make it easier to build. In the process, I discovered that I would need a grand total of 483 hoppers, 236 observers, and 225 jack-o'-lanterns, along with 36 honey blocks, which, by the way, I have never gotten in the 5.5 years since the bee update released. Prior to building the moss farm, I had a bunch of tests to study for, and so I set up a couple farms before studying so that when I finished studying and I had all my assessments done, I could just build the moss farm, no worries. And so that's why we're here at my OG base, where you'll notice there are quite a few pumpkins, which I used to get the jack-o'-lanterns. And then I also made this quick bee farm, which only partially works. The guy who made it has no clue what he's doing because these dispensers only work half the time. But after a lot of struggling, I was able to get all the honey that I needed. I had all the jack-o'-lanterns. I AFK'd for all the iron, and I had enough resources to build the bone meal farm. And it will also be my first layer by layer time lapse since it's Lightmatica. Without further ado, please enjoy because this was the hardest part of this episode was building this stupid bone meal farm. Despite being such a short time lapse, I ended up using all of these materials only for me to realize that this farm has a huge issue. Essentially, bone meal farms work by using stone farm setups such as this one and moss in order to generate compostable items. So if we bone meal this moss here, we get a bunch of items like this. All of these items that you see in front of you, these being grass, bushes, and moss carpets, are compostable, and therefore we get bone meal out of them. This farm here uses the exact same stone generator system and design, but there is a major issue in how it works. So as you can see here, we actually have a bunch of cobblestone which is formed. And unlike stone, which can turn it into moss, cobblestone cannot. So essentially, the stone generators that this farm completely relies on actually break within about 15 minutes straight of running. Because of this, after a while, the farm is not producing enough bone meal to sustain itself, and it will eventually run out. You might think that I simply built it wrong, but even the world download has this issue, and even the Redstone genius himself, who built the entire design, messed up with this bone meal farm. And if we're being honest here, you can't really blame me. The reason that I downloaded this was because I wanted to see how they handled the bone meal distribution among the 3 separate components. I wasn't here to double check that the redstone genius knows how to do redstone. So sure, it's an oversight, but I don't know how I was supposed to expect that this was going to happen. As I usually do, there will be a link for this farm in the description of the video. However, I recommend that you replace it with some other design that won't break within 15 minutes and isn't as high maintenance. If you don't replace your farm, or you're just too lazy to find a new design, then here's how you can fix it. So we'll do the top layers simply because it's easier to see. What you're going to want is you're going to want a bucket. You're going to grab your lava, and then you're going to essentially just want to break everything apart from your honey blocks and your stone. Once you've exposed your honey blocks, you want to make sure that only stone is remaining, and even these bottom layers need to be only stone. The stone generators for this farm are in a 5x5, like around this centerpiece, so make sure you don't accidentally remove these borders here. From there, all you have to do is replace your stone, and the farm will be functional again. However, you will also, if you left it running, you will need to go down here and access the dispensers in the bottom layer to make sure that it's still able to start regenerating itself. And so you need to resupply it with bone meal in case it was all used up. Another thing that I would like to note about this design is that the stone generators naturally have a specific configuration that they break in. So prior to the moss and the stone generators not functioning, you will have cobblestone appear in a pattern something like this, or it will be the other way around, and it'll be like this. This is completely normal, like this just happens. It doesn't matter how many times you replace the stone, this is always going to occur. So if you notice that your cobblestone's in a pattern like this, then you don't actually have to worry about swapping it out, because this is going to happen pretty quickly within like 2 minutes of starting the farm, and it still takes a while to break afterwards. After making some final tweaks to this farm, such as this hopper system which locks hoppers that receive items in order to ensure an even distribution of bone meal, I made a couple changes to the original block set of this build. So originally my block set was only supposed to be these 5 blocks and these 2 on the end, so 7 blocks in total. But then a friend of mine told me that the conversion, the gradient from this deep slate tile to this netherrack is a bit too drastic. And so I wanted to introduce this netherwart brick intermediary and this netherwart block as the final one. However, I realized that that was a little bit too difficult because these netherwart blocks require so much netherwart and nether brick. And so I settled on just normal nether brick for this build specifically. And then once I create a netherwart farm, I'll be able to farm this block as much as I want. And so in the next episode, the building that encases the tree farm will also double as a netherwart farm so that I can have as much of this block as I need for the rest of my build. Another thing to note is that this block right here is only semi-farmable, because obviously netherrack is not farmable, but the smelting process is pretty much entirely automatic since we just put the blocks in. And so this is a kind of gray block in the tile set, because it's not exactly farmable, but it's not exactly not farmable. After deciding on the palette, I began to gather materials, and since I think I haven't shown enough raw gameplay, here's an episode 1 to 8 style montage. Material gathering was pretty short since I already had most of the materials I needed, and I just ended up smelting the netherrack for the nether bricks. Apart from that, I made a program to generate a random gradient that changes the concentration of blocks based on the layer, and I finally began the final build of this episode. After marking out the outline, I began the entrance.
with that being said, thank you for watching the video all the way through to the end. I had a lot of fun recording this and editing it and all the rest of that stuff. This was a great video to make. So thank you for watching it all the way through. And thank you to the people on screen who took the time to just hang around and like comment and stuff like that. So if you like the video, then please like and subscribe. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Goodbye.